the most erotic part of a woman is after you peel off her skin.
Ash and Zach are super smart. They went to college and learned a bunch of stuff. And Bo and Andrew didn't go to college because that's just the way life goes sometimes. What happens when you put them together and you try to make them learn? Grab your friends, let's listen together on Get Dumped on an Info Dump podcast. Hey, welcome to Get Dumped on the Info Dump podcast, the only podcast that matters. Every other podcast is a piece
I moved my legs and now I have to
crap.
pee. I'll be right back.
Oh, I'm leaving that in here. Well, while Zach is peeing,
I'm just kidding.
hello. My name is Andrew, one of your hostess with the mostest, as Bo would say. Speaking of Bo, Bo is here.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry, I was drinking water. I didn't think you were going to be first.
Also here is Ash, as always.
I'm the host with the most.
And before I get to Zach, I just realized I forgot to say, welcome to the podcast where four friends get together. One of them dumps their special interest knowledge on the other three.
They know what this podcast is about.
Unless this is the first time you're listening, then hey, what's up? How you doing?
If this is the first time
What's
you're
up?
listening, you feel free to listen to this episode.
What's up?
But also, I highly suggest that you go back and listen to some previous ones.
What's going on,
Yeah,
man?
especially
not the last previous one. Don't listen to that one.
I'm also like, spoiler alert, this is a follow-up to my previous episode, so you're gonna be kind of lost.
Wait, is this you have so many series? Like I can't even choose which.
Okay.
I can't even think of which the next one is.
What's the most recent one?
I don't know.
What's the most
Zach
recent
is
one
here
where
hosting.
I said, the most recent one where when we finished, I said, I have one more example all ready to go, but we're running
I
late.
have
so I'll
lost
stop.
track so much of your stuff. Hey, everyone, Zach's here.
Wow. Just admitting that you don't like my episodes.
Zach, you have the best episode.
There's so many of them, and there's so vast.
Zach, you
I
are
can't
the
choose.
strong backbone of this podcast with only a little bit of scoliosis.
Thank you. And
Wow,
spinal
Ash just said
stenosis.
that
Don't
none of
forget
us
about
are
the
backbone
stenosis,
except for
too.
Zach.
Zach is the true backbone of this podcast. Andrew,
Wow,
you're
give
the
no love to the editor.
legs.
Wow, does that make it fun of you because I have a broken knee right now?
Oh, I forgot about that. No, just because you're the one who like actually keeps it going so that the episodes can like come out, take the steps to come out. So you're the legs.
Wow,
Zach,
take the steps. Oh,
Zach
geez,
is
you're just
Zach is the backbone.
driving the knife. Speaking of that, I don't think we've mentioned on this podcast. My knee is broken right now, and it hurts a lot.
Are you podcasting from bed?
No, I hobbled downstairs.
Get on my level. Oh, you can walk. Oh, fancy boy.
I hobbled. I cannot walk.
When I had foot problems,
Essentially, I
couldn't
rolled down
walk.
the stairs like a roly-poly.
Yeah.
Anyway, Zach, what do you got for us? Host the episode.
Doesn't that involve having to bend your legs?
Not really.
Hey, it's me. I'm Zach, and I'm here hosting the episode. So this is a continuation of the Petty Science Fights series. This is the first
Yay!
time I say that I'm doing a series and I actually follow it up with a second
Yay!
It only took you a year and a half?
part.
Yay!
Well, I hit a research stop with the Super Hard Dudes second episode. I was looking for a source and I couldn't find it. And then I lost interest.
I
and
just
so
gave
I
up
didn't do
completely.
it. So I gave up completely. But I'll do another one eventually. It'll be fine.
You have to do the super hard dudes. That was so good.
Yeah, I
You
love
said it was
this-
going to be super hard lady dudes.
Yeah, Super Hard Lady Dudes. And so, I didn't want to let
So
people
Don't be
you're
down
a
misogynist
misogynist
by
is
having
what
a
you're
poorly
saying.
piece of shit.
by having a poorly researched episode. So, I wanted
piece
to
of
find a particular source.
Zach hates women. You heard it here first.
But I think the main reason why I'm actually doing a follow-up is because when we finished the last one, I still had one more example already ready to go. So I was like, well, if I don't do more of this, then that's just going to be a waste of the time that I spent writing it down. So I want to start this off with a couple, a little bit of errata and addendums that I found. So you may have seen, and I hope you did, on the social medias, a couple of clips that we did from the last, from the Bone Wars episode with some
Bone
images
Wars.
and stuff like that. And while I was doing that, I found a couple of like interesting extra facts or corrections of things that I had initially misrepresented or just like didn't know at the time. The main one is that the Anisoncus copator, the named after the copator, it is actually was reclassified. It has since been reclassified to Conacodon copator, which was done in 1983. So if you're trying to look up what it looks like now, you got to look up Conacodon copator.
They let him keep the copator part, and that's nice of them.
Yeah, they regenused it. They because this is the thing that happens in paleontology is over time you find that because you're discovering one fossil species at a time, the more you discover of one species, eventually you'll realize, hey, this is actually a lot more similar to this other species than I thought. And then you just put them together
Or
in
it's
the
like,
same
oh,
genus.
it turns out that
You know-
this is a juvenile of another species, so it's actually the same or
Yeah.
whatever.
I don't think that's a correction that needs to be made though, because the most important part of that is the Cope hater part though.
Yeah. But, just for the complete picture. And then in
Just to be
reverse of that,
accurate.
when I was talking about how Cope and Marsh named species after each other, the Tyonius marshii, named after Marsh, this is actually the reclassified name. The original name that it had was Colostius marshii. Though this is
You idiot.
Cope was the guy who reclassified it, and this was in 1875. Originally, the species was described in 1869, so it wasn't really that long afterwards, unlike the Conocodon copator, which was in 1983. And then the other thing that I found out, which is actually kind of funny, is when Marsh named the Mosasaurus copayanus. This was one of, remember how I said that Cope showed him a quarry, and then Marsh was like, talked to the quarry owner and was like,
And
like,
stole
give me
all his
bones.
fossils.
send me
undercut
all
him.
those fossils. That mosasaur that he named after Cope was one of those fossils that the quarry owner had sent him after he cut this deal,
Marsh was such a piece of shit, dude.
which is a real piece of shit move.
I'm going to steal all your fossils, and then I'll just name one after you. Oh.
Yeah.
He started this whole thing. He was so
Mhm.
rude.
You know, with all of the episodes that have come out, I believe it's only Zach episodes that have had to have revisions made.
That's because I'm the only one who cares enough to make
Actually
sure that
goes
my
back and
information
makes
is
sure
correct.
that everything is factual.
That's like you said, one and done, baby. You send the information out and hope that it's correct. That's the Andrew way.
Yeah. That's why Zach is the backbone of this podcast.
Hey,
Thanks.
hey! Don't make fun of my legs again. I swear to God.
I also found out that this like ideological battle between Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla is largely a modern invention. There was the battle between the currents between alternating and direct current, the AC/DC fight. But that was mostly done by the companies.
About to rock. Sorry.
The companies battling over patents and intellectual property. And the two guys, Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison, didn't have like this personal fight that is often shown as like in media. Tesla did write about how he thought that Edison had it out for him, but this was years later after it had all like gone down, and also at a time when he was mentally kind of gone and thought that pigeons were talking to him. So
Oh.
questionable.
Also, Edison was out to get everybody.
Yeah, he was a piece of shit.
Well, he did though. Like he did do that stuff. Edison was widely known as a dick though. So
Yeah, but
even
it
though he
wasn't
was
like
talking to pigeons, like
it wasn't like
right.
a personal battle between Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison. It was a fight between the Edison company and the Westinghouse company that Tesla was contracted to. So it wasn't like this sort of personal
It's not personal.
vendetta.
It's just business.
It doesn't qualify for petty science fights. That's for darn sure.
The part, are you going to talk about the elephant?
We already talked about that.
Yeah, we talked about that. The elephant
Oh,
got
did we?
electrocuted because Thomas
We talked about
Edison
that
was
like
a
3
dick.
times now.
Yeah, Bo remembers.
Stop talking about the elephant.
Mm-hmm.
Just stop it.
Poor elephant.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about the elephant in the room.
Okay, well, instead of talking about an elephant in the room, let's talk about Carl Linnaeus. So I have here a few.
Hey,
I have a
my boy
few
Carl.
funny stories. I found it. So when I was researching the Copator thing a little bit
Carl.
further, I found an article about scientists who did funny names for the things that they found, like the animals that they discovered.
Do you guys know who Carl Linnaeus is?
No idea.
So you know
Carl!
Carl. So you know how
Carl.
anytime we talk about sciencey specimens, they have two names. It's like whatever the one you just said for Marshii.
Mhm.
Carl Linnaeus is the one who came up with a formalized modern system of naming organisms called binomial nomenclature. So he's kind of known as the father of taxonomy because he's the one that like actually came up with the naming conventions of how to call everything.
Mhm.
So he's like a nerd, like a nerd god.
Yeah, he's a turbo nerd.
Yeah, he's a turbo nerd.
Turbo
I wouldn't
nerd?
call
'Cause,
him
like,
a
when-
god, but
you said his name and then Ash cheered.
yeah, I mean he was kind of a piece of he was kind of a garbage because he actually didn't understand like evolution and how change through time worked, but he at least was one of the earliest people who wanted to like categorize the natural world and come up with a
I think
system
you're
of taxonomy.
getting Linnaeus confused with Lamarck.
Oh shoot!
Oh my god.
Oh my gosh, you're so right.
Shame.
Yeah, shame. That's shame on me. That's my bad. I messed up my L names. Linnaeus is the one who came up with binomial nomenclature.
Bo.
Right?
This is how Ash feels right now is how you and I feel constantly on this podcast.
Except for the difference is that I don't really feel bad when I get stuff wrong because it just means it's the opportunity
I
to
don't
learn
feel
something
bad
new.
at all. I don't feel bad. There's no shame.
Well, then
Yeah,
why
so
do you fucking yell at me so much?
I'm not yelling.
I didn't mean today.
This is all the time.
So Linnaeus did come up with the binomial nomenclature.
Yes. Yeah, Linnaeus came up with binomial nomenclature. Lamarck, whose name I don't remember, whose first name I don't remember, is known
I'm going to go
for
with Steve.
Jean-Baptiste.
Jean-Baptiste
Steve
Lamarck.
Lamarck.
Lamarckian evolution is kind of like presented in opposition to Darwinian evolution, whereas Lamarck believed that living things...
Did you say Weenian?
Darwinian?
Darwinian evolution. Whereas Darwin believed the correct thing that genetic modifications and mutations are random and then passed down if they're beneficial. Whereas Lamarck believed that like if something that wasn't quite yet a giraffe spent its entire life stretching towards the trees, eventually its neck would get bigger and it would pass that down to its children. And that's how evolution happened.
Yeah, what was his thing called? The theory of inheritance, I think?
The inheritance of acquired characteristics.
That's it.
But that's also like the thought of that is like, hey, if you get your arm cut off during your life, does that mean that your kid is going to be born with one arm? No,
I hope so.
It doesn't work that way. So he
But that's
just
what
didn't
Lamarck
understand. This is
I
not
broke my
what
knee for
we're
no
not
reason.
talking about Lamarck on this episode of the podcast, though.
I know, I'm sorry.
Stop yelling at Ash. Stop yelling at Ash.
I'm sorry.
He's the one yelling.
I'm really sorry.
It's fine because I'm the one who's allowing this derailment to happen. Anyway, so Lamarck. No, my God! Now we're talking about Carl Linnaeus. He's considered the father of modern taxonomy and more or less pioneered the binomial system in his quest to classify all forms of life on the planet that he could find. Now,
Nerd god.
part of the standard that he was trying to set was to name everything and to give things names that fit them in some way, either describing where they live or what they look like or what they do, you know? Now, part of this quest...
Zach, real quick, if you were to give me one of his names, what would it be?
Tall guy shitty Neus.
Hey, got him.
Yeah, that tracks.
I mean, it would be homo shitty Neus, right?
Yeah, because you're gay, bitch.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Oh, no.
Oh my God.
Zach got canceled. Jesus Christ. Zach is out. He's in a war. First he yelled at Ash, and then he called me gay. Hey, what do you think about Bo?
Yeah, Zach, what do you think about me?
You would be homo mumbleianus.
Lemon pepper chicken wing-itis. I don't know.
That sounds like a weird disease that you
sounds
get.
like a disease.
That sounds like a disease, yeah.
It's like worse than Lyme disease, it sounds like.
Lemon pepperitis.
You get all speckly and you smell like lemons.
But you're delicious, and you're made in the air fryer.
So
Anyway,
because
Zach, well, go back to being gay. What was that?
So because Linnaeus was kind of coming up with this whole classification system out of whole cloth, not everything that he did really stuck or, was entirely correct by like our modern standards. I mean, one of the things that we love getting Ash to go off on tangents on is how the classification and speciation is all nonsense.
Is kind of garbage.
Speciation is kind of garbage.
Yeah, but so when Linnaeus was coming up with all of this, out of thin air, and so it wasn't always going to be perfect. And one of these things was his classification system for plants, because plants are weird. Plants are hard to classify.
Plants are kind of fucked up and garbage.
And so the system that he wanted to use was classifying them based on the number of sexual organs that they have. And so plants have stamens.
He's on the gay thing again.
Stamens and pistils and such like, which are part of the sexual system that they use for pollination and reproduction and all that. And I don't fully understand it because I'm not a botanist, but stamens and pistils.
Dude, plants are so fucking confusing to me. Like,
yeah. So for the example, the main example for this is a group of plants that he named Octandria monogynia. But so this is plants with 8 stamens, which are the plant dongs, and 1 pistil, which is the plant ovary. And so specifically, he wrote about, quote, 8 men in the same bride's chamber with 1 woman. And
Oh, Linnaeus.
It's like that meme.
wax semi-erotically about how, quote, petals do service as bridal beds, adorned with such noble bed curtains and perfumed with so many soft scents that the bridegroom with his bride might there celebrate their nuptials. When now the bed is so prepared, it is time for the bridegroom to embrace his beloved bride and offer her his gifts.
This guy needs to whack it.
He spent too long looking at plants,
dude,
and was like, "These plants are kind of sexy, though."
Yeah. So, well, Andrew, you're going to identify with this guy, the Prussian botanist named Johann Siegesbeck.
Is he gay?
Who said that it was lewd. He said, "This is lewd." He said, "It is such loathsome harlotry, would never have been permitted in the vegetable kingdom by the Creator."
Oh.
Who, he asked, would have thought that bluebells, lilies, and onions could be up to such immorality? And
sexy ass onions.
And wondered, quote, how anyone could teach without offense so licentious a method to studious youth.
How dare you sexualize these plants? He was kind of
The sexiest vegetable is an onion.
Yeah, because it's got sexy layers. It's like when you're peeling an onion, it's like you're undressing a woman.
Oh
I find that the most.
I spend way too long looking at onions.
It's the most erotic part of a woman is after you peel off her skin. Okay, I took it too far. I took it too far.
Do you think that he would hold up 2 onions to his chest and be like, onion movies?
It seems like it with the way that he described that other stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Linnaeus heard about this and took kind of personal offense to it. That somebody would be calling him a creepy weirdo.
Get over here, you sexy onion.
He's over here writing about his plants, and then some other guy is just like, "You're a perv."
Yeah. And he's like, "How dare you call me a perv?" And so he honored Siegesbeck by naming a new species, Siegesbeckia orientalis, after him, which at first Siegesbeck heard about this, and he wrote a letter, and he said, "Thank you for naming a plant after me. That's great." And then later,
after I called you out,
and Linnaeus was like, "Haha, it's got 30 dongs."
And then later he looked it up, and it is a sticky, unpleasant, and unattractive weed with small flowers.
Yeah, not sexy at all. He's like, let me find the least sexy plant. And the guy's like, again, plants are not sexy. So like,
an unsexy plant with small flowers named after him. He's basically saying that he was ugly and had a tiny wiener, I think.
Get wrecked.
So, yeah, get wrecked.
That's a science burn, I guess?
Yeah.
I'd say it's a science burn.
Dude, scientists are weird.
Scientists
we covered that in the last episode with the guy who lived with the skeleton and like put his keys in its mouth or something.
That guy had some issues.
That guy had something else going on.
Like these guys.
You're talking about a guy who's sexualizing plants and you say that guy has an issue?
It's in the 1700s though, so it's like he couldn't just go on the internet and type in bubes, you know?
Yeah. Some people are just more poetic about these things than others.
Yeah. He was making a metaphor so that people would understand how plants reproduced.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you could just be like 1 dongus and 1.
Well, it didn't have 1 dongus. It had 8 donguses.
No, you can be like 8 dongus. That's all you got to say. Like you don't have to be like the flower.
Oh, and they lay together and they would like a concubine being laid to rest.
Yeah, exactly.
Gross.
Yeah. So
Linnaeus was kind of a perv.
Linnaeus was kind of a perv.
But he had a good sense of humor about it.
Yeah. All right, now let's move on to another guy who insulted people by naming ugly animals after them, by talking about a guy named Wilhelm Blendowski. He was a German naturalist in Australia, and this was in the 1850s. He came to Australia, and he was like, "Oh my God, this new land is full of cool new stuff that I can study and catalog." But he kept butting heads with certain members of the Philosophical Institute.
You didn't have to do the accent.
What?
You didn't have to do the accent.
I did. We all have to live with it.
Zach, I enjoyed it. Don't.
I enjoyed it too. Don't let Ash step on your toes.
Yeah, just watch your toes around, Ash.
Thank you.
Here I go stomping again.
So he was in the Australian state of Victoria, which was kind of like the major hub of English colonization in Australia at the time. Victoria is the state that Melbourne is in. And so he kept butting heads with the people who were the heads of the certain members of the Philosophical Institute of Victoria. And partially this was because he was kind of prickly and like easy to anger. But
like
also,
a cactus.
they were all kind of dicks to him because they were all English and he was German, and they would always make fun of the fact that he had a German accent and spoke
They
English
go,
poorly.
hinga-dinga-derg.
That's
That-
fucking rude.
Yeah, this is very rude. Also, isn't the Hingadingadurgan air Leif
I don't
Erikson
know. I just
He
keep
was
going, man.
not-
It's supposed to be
German.
Icelandic or something?
something like that?
It's 11 p.m. on a Monday, man. I'm tired. Just keep
It's
going.
10:38. There's a difference, sir.
I'm rounding up.
So he, one of the things that he did was cataloging fish. He was like, "Oh, look at all these cool new fish that I can catalog." And so at one point, he came to the Philosophical Institute of Victoria with 19 new fish. He was going over them. He was going over his discoveries and their names and their descriptions. And two members of the Philosophical Institute of Victoria noticed that there was two fish named after them. These were Brosmius Bleasdalii, named after Reverend John Bleasdale, and Cernua, or Kernua, I didn't look this up beforehand, Eadesii, for Dr. Richard Eads. How were these two fish described? Bleasdalii was described as a slimy, slippery fish that lives in the mud, is of a violet bluish color on the belly.
Okay, hold on. What fish isn't slimy and slippery? He's just writing that to be a dick.
Well, you know,
I've never
some
met a
are-
fish that was like dry,
Some are, yeah, because they live
easy
underwater.
to hold on to.
Well, some are exceptionally slimy, you know? They produce their own slime or something like that. Then the Eadesii was a fish easily recognized by its low forehead, big belly, and sharp spine.
Okay, that's funny.
Dang.
That's funny. That's good.
Yeah.
Did it look like the guy he named it after?
So I found one of the websites I was researching this on did actually put comparisons. So what do you think about these?
I mean, I gotta be honest, all fish look alike.
Those are two very different looking fish. Also, that's racist.
I don't think that
I
they
said
have any
regret it.
particular correlation physically to the people. These fish don't look like the people, but I understand where he was coming from.
Anyway, Bleasdale.
How can you
and,
say that these two fish look the same? They look so completely different. This one is shaped like a diamond, and this one is shaped like a cylinder, and this one has a spiny fin, and this one has a regular fin. And this
They
one
have fins and tails.
and this one's
and
tail
gills.
is like a half moon shape, and this one it's like a W shape.
All fish look alike. I regret nothing.
Wow, he's fish blind.
Wow. Andrew, would you also say that a horse and a deer look alike?
Yes, without even a question.
Bo,
Linnaeus
now
would
that you're
hate
back,
you.
what do you think about these fish?
Some spiny fish.
Are they slimy? Would you say they're slimy?
I said the top one's slimy, the top one's spiny, the bottom one's spiny.
Basically, the two of them, these two who are named after the fish, were very mad about it and threatened to resign from the council, and they had to form a subcommittee
do it.
to consider whether or not
Why?
they would let them leave. They're like, this guy's got a name Fish after me. What a fucking asshole.
He's being mean to us. He's saying that I look like an ugly fish.
Okay, how many people know the real names of animals?
Well, I mean, this was the early times when every new discovery was exciting. And so the newspapers published satire, they published political cartoons about it. And they wrote
Oh my
about it.
God.
I have some quotes from the newspapers. The
People
Melbourne,
cared about science back then. That's crazy.
yeah. The Melbourne Punch said, "We understand that the inquiry into Mr. Blendowski's case and the stomachic considerations connected therewith is still pending. The gentleman who complained of the libelous insinuation that he had a black stomach with blue spots was for some time under a severe examination, but he emerged from it with a spotless reputation."
Spotless?
That's a cheeky. Did you say that it was the Melbourne Punch?
Yeah. And then the Melbourne
that's a
Argus.
newspaper? That's a really good name for a newspaper.
Yeah. And the Argus said, "The fish called after Dr. Eads was described as having a receding forehead and a large belly. If the doctor be dissatisfied with his stomach and his forehead, and we trust that his distrust of them is altogether unfounded, neither Mr. Blendowski nor Mr. Blendowski's fish is responsible for the misfortune." Which is
That's
basically
wild.
being like, hey, it's not the fish's fault you don't like your stomach and forehead.
That's weird. That was news back then. And somebody back then was reading this and being like, why is this in here?
No, they were reading it and going, ooh.
So basically, anyway, they weren't able to force him out of the Institute, but they did forbid the publication of the fish in the Institute's transactions.
Oh, boo. Deal with the fact that you got a pot belly.
Like, this is going to be named like this for the rest of time. My name is going to stand through history. Pooey.
And
You
so
know,
they
it's-
refused to accept the names of these two fish, and it was another 50 years before somebody claimed and named them by other scientists.
Boo.
Yeah.
Original names.
I bet they were
Original
happy about it.
names.
There's a few other ones in this article that I found, and one of the particularly funny ones that I'll just go over kind of quickly. There's a paleontologist who is named Rousseau H. Flower, who is known for kind of being eccentric. Apparently, he was such a big chain smoker that he would smoke in the shower.
Oh.
He was quoted as saying, "I named cephalopods after my friends and worms after my enemies, only I could never get enough worms."
Jesus Christ. What? Scientists are weird, dude. Why did they all hate each other?
Because it was a race, man, to see who could discover the most stuff.
Mm-hmm. He was basically, and then he found a fossil coral that resembled a little wart, and he named it after Nikita Khrushchev because Khrushchev had warts on his nose, which is kind
Wow.
of funny.
Do they still do that?
I
I mean, I know that like discovering new species is probably pretty hard nowadays, but
They named something after Sonic the Hedgehog.
yeah, there's some. There's a few. There's a few. I was looking after it. A lot of the times, if there's a new species discovered that's hairier than other species, they'll name it Chewbacca, which I think is funny. I found like 2 Chewbaccas. One of them was a spider, and one of them was a moth. And then
that's offensive to Wookiees. I'm pretty sure we're going to hear that in the Wookiee punch later on about like how
Yeah.
offensive it is.
Mostly people just name stuff after
the
themselves.
It's the Kashyyyk punch. That's the planet they're from.
It's
I did also
solid.
find-
Oh my god, that was good. That was good, Andrew.
Thanks, Bo. Thanks, Bo. Thank you.
Good job. I did with 3 Ys, and I did find also a 16 million year old extinct giraffe ancestor that they called Xenocaryx amygdalae because it had a funny little structure on its head that kind of looked like one of Padme Amidala's hairstyles in The Phantom Menace.
So nerds are just turning to sci-fi now.
I mean,
They named a
Now?
wasp after Jackie Chan.
What's it called? What's its name? Is it Jackie Chan?
It's
Jackie Chanii.
yeah, Actrotaphus Jackie Chanii.
That sounds very, very made up.
I mean, everything's made up in some way, you know?
Oh,
So like
don't
yeah,
get
now it's
philosophical
like
to me.
now it's like people name it after famous people or they name it after themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Not like their neighbor Greg who like mows the lawn at 6 a.m.
There's like more like international bodies that like have to approve these things, so I think that you can't name them after personal grudges as much anymore.
Yeah, we need to bring it back.
I mean, yeah. there's an extinct trilobite called Han Solo. There's an existing genus called Han, and eventually somebody was like, I'm going to name this species Solo.
Okay. There's
so it's
other
called Han
movies.
Solo.
There's other movies than Star Wars people.
What is it that's named after Sonic? Do you know?
It's a chromosome.
The fast food chain.
We talked about this on the podcast before.
Yeah,
yeah,
the Sonic
because it's how
Hedgehog chromosome.
fast it goes through your system into diarrhea.
It causes your body to not
Sepsis.
create some process. Yeah, we already talked about it. We're not going to talk about it again. So next, I'm going to go into the next story that I have. We're going to shift gears entirely. Bo, why don't you return the favor that I did last episode and pronounce this name for me?
We know I don't do that, but I'll do it for you. It's fine. Oh, Guglielmo Macaroni.
Guglielmo Macaroni. This is the story of Guglielmo Macaroni versus the entire radio community. So it's
Wait, his name was Macaroni?
and it was it's Marconi.
Is that real? Oh, okay.
It's I think it's pronounced Guglielmo. It's a funny looking
Guillermo Macaroni. Yep.
Guglielmo Marconi. So this is a story of the late 1800s when electricity, the second half of the 1800s, electricity was becoming accessible. People were figuring out how to make it and installing electric infrastructure into their cities. And as such, a lot of scientists were experimenting with electricity and figuring out what they could do with electricity. and how they could use it for various things. Like what can we do with electricity? What's it good for?
Torture.
Yeah, I mean, yes, but also
Radio.
wireless transmission, radio.
No, I guess that.
Yeah,
too.
so one of the big goals of the day was to figure out wireless transmission.
Also, electricity.
Also electricity. So, as you probably know, at this point in time, the main method of long distance communication was sending Morse code telegraph signals.
Oh, I thought it was just screaming really loud.
And so these would be done with wired cables. So you'd have to run a wired cable from one telegraph to the other in order to get any messages. And so if you wanted to, communicate with somebody, you'd have to send a message to a specific telegraph office, and then that message would have to be physically sent to the end location. So if you were in England and you wanted to send a message to somebody in America, you could telegraph it to another telegraph office, but then they'd still have to ship that message across the ocean on a ship.
And then they ship it to you and you open it and it's just a bunch of dots and dashes and you're like, I don't know, Morse code.
I mean, somebody would transliterate it.
Yeah, but that's not as
first.
funny, Zach.
It's true. And so the progress towards wireless transmission really kicked off with a guy named Heinrich Hertz, who in 1887 demonstrated the existence of electromagnetic waves. He
Also
did some
known as Hertz.
Yeah, exactly.
Nailed it.
That's where we get the name Hertz from. Is
Step
from
on my
Heinrich Hertz.
toes. I'll step on your fucking
Good job.
toes.
Good job, Bo. Good job,
Thank
Bo.
you.
You did it.
Good job, Bo.
Go, Bo.
He did some electric magic with capacitors to zap a spark in between two electrodes, which then triggered a zap between two separate electrodes a few meters away, which is effectively discovering radio waves. And for a time we're called
That's
Hertzian
rad.
waves. And that's why we measure things in hertz, like refresh rates and rotations and stuff like that.
And rental cars.
And how much you can hear.
Yeah, well, that's because it's frequency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And donuts. Imagine me punching you and saying hurts
Oh,
donut.
it hurts. It would hurt so bad.
Andrew, another solid one, Andrew. Another solid one.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Ash and Zach don't appreciate it, but I'm
That's
glad
pretty
you do.
good.
I was going
I mean-
along with the bit. What?
I
I
mean-
was going along with the bit.
I'm your biggest supporter here. They're all a bunch of haters. Watch your toes.
I was
Watch your
yes
knees.
A
anding.
bunch of co-haters.
So everybody wanted to take advantage of this, and now that Hertz had proved that wireless transmission was possible, people were like, "How far can we get this? What can we do with this?" And so now we introduce an Italian guy named Guglielmo Marconi and his big company that
Marconi.
he had because of his daddy's money.
My daddy.
Oh no, another Richie Rich boy.
Yeah,
Oh,
he
me
was
papa.
as a Richie Rich boy, he was able to surpass previous limitations on radio. And I will admit that. So I'm skipping over a few other important names in the development of radio. I'm not going to say that Marconi came in here and out of nothing was just like radio. Obviously, Hertz invented this first. There was a couple of guys first as well. The furthest that anybody could send a message was about a half a mile. So the furthest that anyone could get any wireless transmission at this point was about a half a mile.
That's not great.
The big thing also was sight lines. People couldn't get a message over a hill, which is funny to think about a wireless electromagnetic wave not being able to be detected over a hill. But he managed to solve that problem. So first he was transmitted a signal by 2 miles, and then he did it over a hill and eventually proved that signals could be sent past the horizon. And then finally, in 1901, he transmitted the letter S in Morse code from Cornwall to Newfoundland, which
Holy
crossed
shit.
the Atlantic.
That's really far.
Yeah. By many accounts, the signal was weak. And it was less of like, we can send messages now, and more like, this barely worked and we need to develop it a lot further.
More like proof of concept.
Yeah, but it was
we sent
definitely
a
a proof
letter.
of comfort.
A single letter.
It was proof of concept for sure. But Marconi got credit for inventing radio from this, which is, I think, relatively deserved. But what he did was he pulled some strings and lawyered it up so that he got a really, really restrictive patent. So he was able to overturn some other guys' patents and basically get sole patent over all wireless radio transmission.
Oh, come on, man.
He even got the
Marconi.
patent office to overturn one of Nikola Tesla's patents so that he could have it.
Oh.
And so
What a
this
dick.
cheesed off a lot of scientists
I hate
working
this
with
guy.
radio, because now it meant that they had to license the wireless technology from Marconi's company if they wanted to do anything with wireless electric.
Trying to monopolize the radio game.
Yeah, if they wanted to do anything with radio, they'd had to license the technology every time that they used it. And so one of these guys was a man named Neville Maskelyne, who was a musician, a music hall. I wrote musician. I meant to write magician. He was a music hall magician whose father was also a music hall magician. I wrote music hall musician. That obviously, right?
I mean, that would make sense.
Yeah. So his dad was also a magician and an inventor. One of the things that his dad invented was a lock for bathrooms that you had to put a penny in to unlock. So he's the guy who invented
fucking Carney.
Yeah. And then
I don't like it
I'm
when you
not paying a
charge me
penny to take a shit.
bathroom.
I'll shit outside of the door.
Jesus.
And
Pennies were a lot back then.
yeah. And Neville was
That's
the same. He was inventing stuff to use in his stage shows. And he got
It's gotta be like $1,
It's the
right?
prestige.
Yeah.
It's like in Europe, you have to pay 50 cents to use the bathroom, basically anywhere.
Hell
Pretty
no.
much. That's what
I'll poop in the street.
That's the real American superiority. It's free toilets.
Free toilets and free tap water.
Yeah.
Yeah, there might be lead in there, but it's free.
So one of the things that Neville really got interested in was incorporating radio stuff into his stage shows, and he was trying to develop his own versions of the radio technology. And he was doing his own like tiny Morse code transmissions. Like he invented like smaller Morse code things so that he could communicate secretly with his assistants to do stuff to do magic.
Oh, that's cool.
But he was mad that every time he wanted to do anything, he would have to pay Marconi's company.
Marconi.
Now back to Marconi. He was like, my radio is the shit. This is so cool. And I want to demonstrate this to the public. And he had really gotten down this like long distance transmission. And so he was going to get everybody together in this hall in London and transmit a message from Cornwall, which was about 300 miles away, which was pretty fucking cool for back in the day. And this was at the time when if you wanted to show off a new scientific invention that you made, it was like, I'm going to get a bunch of people together in a theater and I'm going to show it off. I'm going to have a little bit of theatricality to this. Now, everybody was like, but wait, if you're just broadcasting these signals, doesn't it mean that anybody could just like listen in? And he was like, no, because we're going to be doing it in tuned frequencies. So he was also doing this whole tuned frequency thing and said, quote, I can tune my instruments so that no other instrument that is not similarly tuned can tap my messages. And he made a big deal about how it was private. So
I really hope this goes tits up.
Imagine you're sitting in this theater. Marconi's collaborator, John Fleming, is standing in front of a little light that is basically set to have an electricity arc through it when it gets a signal. Marconi is transmitting from a big antenna in Cornwall 300 miles away. You're sitting there in silence, waiting for the Morse code to start. And it starts. But then you start hearing what the Morse code is saying. And it's just the word rats over and over. Just rats, 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 rats. And then it says, and then it starts a poem. There was a young man from Italy who diddled the public quite prettily.
Oh, shit.
And then some rude Shakespeare lines. And then it stopped just before the intended message from Marconi started coming in. And everyone was like, what? What is this?
And this is all in Morse code, right?
And this is all Morse code. And
So
everybody
it took
who was there
7
would have
years.
yeah, but everybody who was there would have understood Morse code. Like it was just a thing that people knew back then. Like you knew Morse code because you had to, right? Like we don't know Morse code because who the fuck communicates over telegraph anymore? But like people who would be like invested enough to go like leave their house to go to this place, they would know Morse code.
The only Morse code people know now is the do 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 do.
Yeah, because they saw
SOS.
Titanic.
I learned it from the Panic Room movie.
With who was in
Jodie
that?
Jodie
Foster.
Foster.
Jodie Foster.
And young Kristen
And
Stewart.
Forrest Whitaker.
Yeah, I think so.
And a country singer.
A country
Didn't they-
singer?
Wasn't Dwight Yoakam in that movie?
Oh yeah, I think he was.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and Jared Leto.
Wow.
He was the Morse code.
So this was, if you haven't guessed it,
So he rickrolled him.
this was Neville Maskelyne's doing. He had seen this as an opportunity to take Marconi down a peg, and he essentially brute force hacked the signal. He erected
yeah.
a 50-foot antenna nearby and turbocharged the signal with like all the electricity he could muster to override all other signals in the area. So if you were like listening for if you like had an antenna just like in your area, like ready, you would have heard it too. It would have set off every single telegraph in the area.
That's fucking hilarious.
You're just chilling, and then you just hear rats.
And this was basically to show that
rats.
it was like to show that Marconi's method of like secure transmission wasn't perfect. It was crude but effective. This is, like just overpowering a television signal. Like I think this is like what those people did with the Max Headroom thing in the 80s.
Oh yeah, I remember that. That was weird.
But so this was effectively the first ever wireless hacking was done.
Heck yeah. So he's just sitting there. He's just sitting there in his little transponder tower, like, I'm in.
Was he like the first? It was like, what do I say? What do I say? Rats. Like that's.
Yeah, why did he say rats?
Because back then, rats was like something you would say like, this is all bullshit. You'd be like, rats.
Oh, it's just like shit.
Gotcha.
Oh, slang. Got it.
And so
fuck.
So they were all cheesed. John Fleming, the collaborator,
Rats,
he set out.
Did you mean to say that?
Oh, got him.
He like basically sent a letter to the newspaper that was like, "Who's responsible this?" And he called it scientific hooliganism. And then Maskelyne responded with a letter to the newspaper that was like, "Yeah, I did this because you suck. Fuck you."
Yeah, he does suck.
Good.
Yeah. Now, this didn't have any long-term effects, really. Marconi looked like a dummy for a little while, and he just continued developing his radio, but it was pretty funny to me.
He had egg on his face. No, that's great. I love that.
Yeah, and we do have to give Marconi a little bit of credit because, obviously he and his company, they did eventually become responsible for, like, every ship being able to have a wireless antenna on it. Like, that was the reason why, like, the Titanic had the wireless antenna on it. That was entirely because of Marconi's company.
A lot of good it did it.
Yeah, everyone knows that when the Titanic started going down, they just started yelling rats.
Rats.
But
also he boxed out everybody else who possibly could have done it. So, like...
Yeah. So, at what cost?
Begrudging credit, I guess.
It was a funny, because, like, you think of SOS as being, like, this, like, long... known thing, right? But I was looking it up, and it's like the Titanic was one of the first ships ever to send an SOS signal because it was one of the first ships ever to have a wireless telegraph on board. And so, like, before that, you couldn't just like be trailing a wire across the Atlantic,
Yeah.
Pretty neat. Although I guess if it did have a wire, if everybody sank, they could have just like held onto the wire and like crawled it and like hand over hand it all the way back to England, right?
I mean, I guess technically you probably would freeze to death
because that's a very long climb.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
What is their core strength like?
Yeah.
Did you know that SOS is not an acronym?
No, it's not. It's save our ship. Everyone knows that.
That's not what it means. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a distress signal.
And it's picked because it's really easy to recognize because it's short, long, short.
That's the only reason I remember it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to make up an acronym now.
Save our ship is a what do you call it?
A backronym.
A backronym. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's just like real. Zach, the back of this podcast.
the backronym of this podcast.
Oh, thanks.
SOS stands for Save Our Shenanigans.
There we go. Well, that was everything that I had for this second edition of Petty Science Fights. A nice brisk...
You know what my favorite part is.
What was your favorite part, Andrew?
Scientists became my top.
Rats.
That was my favorite part too.
Rats.
Everybody.
But
that was great.
But what was your favorite part?
I just love petty scientists and slimy, spiny fishes. I was at the back.
Yeah, that was really good. The fact that he named it
like that.
after those guys is funny. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like the guy who was like, "Oh, it's a slimy fish. Every fish is slimy." No.
Yeah, but some are slimier than others. Have you ever seen a hagfish, man?
And it was a mud dweller.
Yeah.
I stand by my statement.
Every
fish look alike, and every fish is slimy.
Oh,
dude, it is insane that you would say that every fish looks alike. There are like.
Go ahead. Sorry.
What?
Nothing. Go
ahead.
What
were you gonna say?
I was gonna say my second favorite part was when Zach called Andrew gay.
Oh yeah, that was my third favorite part.
Homo.
Finish sentence.
I think Ash meant like the Homo erectus thing, and then you just went like homophobic with it.
Yeah, you were like gay Andrew.
Homo erectus, more like homophobia. Zach.
Oh,
Zach.
Yeah. Zach.
Look at the record stand. Zach is homophobic.
No.
Yeah,
Rats.
it's on
Oh,
record.
rats.
It's recorded.
Oh, jeez.
Just
Oh,
got
no.
ratsed.
Oh, jeez. Oh, no.
Say rats.
Rats.
Rats. Hell yeah. Who took us in? Was it me?
It was you.
It was you.
Hey everyone. Thanks for listening to this episode of Get Dumped On, the Info Dump Podcast, the podcast about science fights, and these guys are just terrible, except for the rats guy. I love that guy.
They're all great. You should like them because you're one of the pettiest people I've ever met.
I've never been petty in my life.
Oh my God, he's being,
How dare you?
God, he's
I've
being-
never
he's
listened to Tom Petty.
being petty right now. Oh God, he's doing it.
You
right
should
now.
listen to Tom Petty. Tom Petty kicks ass.
He's dead.
More like kicks rats. Yeah, thanks for listening to Get Dumped On, the Info Dump Podcast. Find us on TikTok now. We have a TikTok. What is it? Get Dumped On Podcast?
Something like that.
Bunch of periods in it. I think
You made what do you mean something like you made it?
Here, I'll pull it up right now.
when you sign
Hold
up for
on.
a TikTok, they give you like a default name that you have to wait a month to change.
Hold on, I'm pulling it up
Okay,
right
well,
quick. Hold on.
We're on TikTok.
Where is it? We're
Find us.
following. Hold on. Get period dumped period on period pod.
Yes,
That-
it's Get Dumped On Pod, but with periods. If you just
Okay,
search,
good.
I mean, our display name is Get Dumped On at Infodump Podcast. So if you just search for that,
Okay,
it'll give
yeah.
it, you'll find
Do
us.
that.
All right. Well, I'm gonna watch some TikToks now.
As always, we're Get Dumped On Podcast on Instagram and getdumpedonpodcast@gmail.com. Send us an email of all your favorite rats.
Yeah, and somebody else post the episode discussions on Reddit. I can't be arsed to do it.
Oh yeah, I forgot we still have a Reddit. All right, well, hey, we'll see you
We
guys
do?
next week. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I certainly did. I know that these other
Scientists are becoming
yahoos,
my new Kendrick Lamar of how their pettiness is great.
Yeah, I love it, dude. One of my favorite
They're
subjects.
definitely not like us. All right, we'll see you guys next week.
All right,
Goodbye.
bye.
Oh,
Love
yeah,
you.
bye.
Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye. Rats.
Ash and Zach are super smart. They went to college and learned a bunch of stuff. And Bo and Andrew didn't go to college because that's just the way life goes sometimes. What happens when you put them together and you try to make them learn? Grab your friends, let's listen together on Get Dumped On an Info Dump Podcast.
Rats, 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 rats,
Everybody. It's not a race. You could stop. Take us out, Horton Frankie.
Because you're gay, bitch.